Hi everyone, I'm Miss Lydia from the Boston Library. Thank you so much for joining me for our craft project today. Today we're going to be doing some artwork. So our supplies for this project are some canvas boards, paint, and some string. I'm going to show you a couple of different techniques to create some really cool designs using these supplies. Our first step is to prepare our canvas. You can use any size canvas that you want to. These are canvas boards, so they're very thin. They're very cheap to buy. You can use a regular canvas as well. I have my canvas set up on some paper cups to just lift it off of my work surface. You want to make sure that your work surface is protected. Also make sure, if you don't want to get paint on your hands, that you're wearing gloves and protect your clothing as well. I have some other paper cups that I'm going to use as supplies here too. You can use whatever color you want as your base. I'm going to start by using a white base, and you're going to use a fair amount of this paint. So using one of my paper cups, I'm going to squirt a good amount of white paint into that. And then I have a foam brush that I'm going to use. These work best to get a really thick, solid layer of paint down. You want to get a lot of paint on your canvas. That helps the design to flow better. So once I've poured my paint on, I'm just going to gently spread that. Make sure that I get that thick layer of white paint all the way across. And you want to smooth that out as much as you can, but a few brush strokes are fine in there. You want to work fairly quickly with this. You don't want that bottom layer to dry. If you've gotten it on thick enough, you should have some time to work with it. But again, you don't want it to dry completely before you've done the next step. Now you need to pick your accent color. You can, again, use any colors that you want. I would suggest something that's high contrast. So I've chosen a green color here that I'm going to use. I've poured some of that into my paper cup, and then I have a piece of string. You don't have to be too specific with exactly how long this is going to be. You can cut multiples because depending on how the design comes out, you may want other pieces ready to go. So I'm going to cut about 4 or 5 of these just in case I end up needing them. For this, you can use any type of yarn or twine that you have on hand. You can also use beads or chain as well. It makes a slightly different design. Once I have that piece of string ready to go, I'm going to dip that into the paint that I just poured in here. And I want to try to make sure that the whole thing is covered with paint. So you can even use your paintbrush or your fingers to stick that down inside of there, get that all coated with paint. The biggest thing here is that I don't want any giant globs of paint to come off of it. So I have a coated string here, and I'm going to gently set that down and kind of squiggle it across there. And then you can just let that set there for a second, kind of let it sink into the paint, or if you want, again, you can take your finger and just gently press that down, just so that it's made contact with the canvas all the way around. And at this point, I'm just going to pull it off. And then I can stick that string right back in that paint if I want to add more to this design. So at this point, I have a design that looks like that. If you want to go minimalist, that's totally fine, and you can just leave it at that. Or you can continue to add, you could add different colors, you can add more layers to it. So if you were going to add more layers, what you're going to want to do is, again, take that paintbrush, push that string or a new string down into your green paint again, place it back down. So you can layer this in any way that you want. You could add another layer down lower. So if I start that right there, and I'm going to kind of squiggle that across, I don't want it looping back on itself. Then I do that. Again, I'm going to gently press that down just a little bit, and then pull that slowly off. And you can see that adds just a little bit more depth to it. You can keep going with that as much as you want. Just know that at any point in that process, you can mess it up as well. The nice thing about this is if you don't have a lot of canvases to have some trial and error with it, if you've gotten enough paint on there and you haven't let it dry, you can wipe everything off and start fresh. Just get another layer of paint down, Or the other thing that I found is if you mess them up, you can take whatever your darkest color is, coat that entirely, and then do the design from dark to light. So as long as you have your contrasting colors, you can start with a dark base. So if I had messed this up, I could go full on green with this and then actually take a white design over the top of it. So I'm pretty happy with the way this one looks. I'm going to set that aside and I will show you the next technique. For our second technique, we're going to use several strands of string and some different colors of paint to create more of a feather-like look. So we're going to start with the same first step. So I have my canvas set up. I'm going to get a really solid coat of white paint on top of that. You want to make sure that you're really flooding the canvas with your white paint. You want a solid layer on there. Once I have my solid layer of white on there, I'm going to prepare my string. So I have a tinfoil tray that I put together, just folded up the sides of a piece of tinfoil. This is just to protect my work surface. So you definitely want something that you can pour paint into and then just dispose of after. I also have about 5 or 6 strands of string here that I've cut, all approximately the length of my canvas, just a little bit longer. I'm going to lay those all down together right in the middle of my tray. And then I'm going to create some stripes of color on top of them. So once I have those lined up, I have to think about what order I want my colors in, and then I'm just going to pour my paint right over top of it. So I have my paint layered in the order that I want over top of my strands of string, and then I'm just going to make sure by just wiggling those back and forth just a little bit that every strand of string is completely covered in paint. You can kind of twist them and you can move them back and forth. You just don't want to pull them through the paint because then you'll end up messing up your color order. Once I have those fully covered, I'm going to take one strand of string to start, and I'm going to lay it down on a diagonal on top of my canvas. And then I'm going to simply pull it off and kind of flick it at the end. So that you end up with a bit of a feather look. So that's just one side of it. Then I'm going to take another strand and I'm going to do the same thing going the opposite direction. So I'm going to pick the same midline right here. Wiggle that back and forth just so that it's settled into that white paint. And I'm going to make that same motion off the other side. So you can see the beginning of that design. And then you can continue to layer that. So you can add more. I've made more strands of the same color pattern here. So I'm going to just kind of try to line them up and just add a little bit more to that design. So I can pull that feather out just a little bit more. And then depending on how your design has finished off, you can add a little bit more paint. So like right up at the top here, I didn't have my strand going quite far enough, so I'm just going to fill that in with a little bit of green so that that design continues up the top. The other thing we're going to do is take a bit of that green, since that's my main color, and I'm going to run a strand of that straight down the middle. There you can see the final product of the feather design. You can use as many colors or as few colors as you want for this. You can go over that several times if you need to continue to draw out the design. You could also, if you wanted to make them slightly smaller, you can put them in different places on here. So you could do one across diagonally and you could do 2 smaller ones on either side. There's a lot of flexibility in this project. Here you can see the same technique using just a single color. So I dragged this same strand of string through a couple of times, and you can see you get a little bit more of a marbling effect with the blue and the white when you do that. Here you can see our 3 different examples. So we have our feather technique with multiple colors with just a single color, and then our original dip and pull string technique as well. The best piece of advice that I can give with this is to really flood your canvas with whatever you're using as your base color. You do want a high contrast with your design, but by using a lot of paint in that original layer, you'll get a much better flow for your colors in your design. I hope you enjoyed today's project. If you have any questions, let us know, and we will see you again next week. Thank you.